A street girl, an unthinkable challenge, and a silence no one could heal. When everything seemed lost, she appeared with a proposal no one dared to make. It was another cloudy morning in Portland. The city, already known for its long silences and sprawling parks, seemed to reflect Henry's mood, a man with stern features and a vacant stare, owner of one of the largest networks of medical clinics. In the Pacific Northwest, he walked slowly along the paths of Laurelhurst Park, pushing his son Luke's wheelchair with the same apathy as always. The boy, silent and motionless since the tragic accident that had taken his mother's life, kept his eyes downcast, almost always lost between the wheels of his own chair. No doctor had been able to explain why he had stopped walking. The tests were normal. There were no fractures, no injuries, nothing, just silence. And silence, as Henry well knew, was a diagnosis without an answer. The routine of the two had transformed into a monotonous cycle of consultations, therapies, and long silent walks through the park. Henry, who was once known for his energy and charisma in the corridors of his clinics, was now merely a shadow of his former self. Employees whispered about the drastic change in their boss, about how he had withdrawn after the accident that took Caroline. Caroline, always so vibrant and full of life, her smile lit up any room, and her laugh was contagious even to the most serious people. She was the perfect balance to Henry's methodical and sometimes cold personality. It was she who insisted they buy the house in the tree-lined neighborhood, she who filled the rooms with colors and life. And now, without her, the mansion had transformed into a museum of memories that no one dared to touch. On that specific morning, as they rounded one of the park's trails, something unusual happened. Henry noticed a figure standing right in the middle of the path. It was a girl, thin, small, dressed in an improvised white smock, dirty at the edges and wrinkled. A toy stethoscope hung from her neck, and her bare feet contrasted with the cold grass. Her expression wasn't one of asking, but of challenge. In her hands she carried a cardboard sign with crooked letters written in pen. "I cure invisible pains. Price, 1 million. Henry barely stopped the wheelchair in time. He paused, confused, irritated, trying to understand if this was some kind of provocation. His eyes scanned the girl from top to bottom. She didn't appear to be more than 12 years old, but there was something in her gaze that seemed much older, much wiser. "Excuse me," he said, trying to go around the girl. But she didn't move. "You need my services," said the girl with a clear and confident voice that didn't match her fragile appearance. Henry laughed, a dry laugh without humor. "No, thank you. We've already consulted the best specialists in the IKE country." "They treat the body," the girl replied, looking directly at Luke. "I treat what can't be seen." Something about the girl's presence made him hesitate. He thought about ignoring her, about turning around and pretending that this ridiculous scene had never existed. But there was something in her eyes that held him inside. It wasn't pity. It was as if she could see through the layers he had learned to build over the months. As if she knew. What exactly she knew, Henry had no idea. But there, in that fraction of a second, for the first time in a long time, he felt that someone had looked directly at what he was trying hardest to hide. "What's your name?" asked Luke suddenly, breaking months of almost absolute silence. Henry looked at his son, surprised. Luke hadn't spoken to strangers since the accident. In fact, he barely spoke to his own father. "Claire," replied the girl, smiling for the first time. A simple smile without artifice. "And you're Luke, and this is your father, Henry." The doctor frowned, intrigued. "How do you know our names?" "People talk, and I listen," Claire answered simply. "You come here every day at the same time. You follow the same path, you have the same empty looks." Henry felt his face grow hot. Who was this girl to talk to him like that? To analyze his life, his grief, his pain? "Let's go, Luke," he said, preparing to go around the girl. "Wait," asked Luke, his voice still low, but with a firmness that surprised his father. "I want to hear what she has to say." Claire knelt in front of the wheelchair, coming to Luke's eye level. "You don't need this chair," she said without beating around the bush. "Your feet are perfect, it's your heart that's broken." Luke blinked, visibly affected by the direct words. A solitary tear rolled down his face. "Enough," interrupted Henry, pulling the chair back. "I won't allow some some charlatan to traumatize my son even more. Claire got up calmly, not seeming offended. The trauma is already there, Doctor. You're just pretending not to see it. Who are you? Where are your parents? Demanded Henry, looking around as if expecting to see some responsible adult. I live over there. Claire pointed to one of the humbler areas near the park. With my grandmother. She's a healer. She taught me everything I know. A healer? Repeated Henry with disdain. Of course. You don't believe in cures that don't come from your medicines and machines, observed Claire. I understand. But some pains don't show up on any test, isn't that right? These last words hit Henry like a punch. It was exactly what the neurologists had said about Luke's condition, that there was no physical explanation for his paralysis, that it could be something emotional, something that needed to be treated from the inside out. How do you know that? He stammered. Claire smiled again but didn't answer. She simply opened her small worn backpack and took out a colorful notebook. For you, she said, handing the notebook to Luke. Write down here everything you can't say, out loud. When you're ready, show me. Luke accepted the gift, touching the notebook as if it were something precious. $1 million is a lot of money for you, isn't it? Asked Claire, turning to Henry. But that's not what I want. I just want you to be honest, especially with each other. With those words, she turned her back and began to walk away, her bare feet leaving light marks on the damp grass of the park. Wait, called Luke impulsively. Will you come back tomorrow? Claire stopped and looked over her shoulder. Every day, same time, same place. After that, she disappeared among the trees, leaving behind a confused Henry and a visibly agitated Luke, clutching the colorful notebook as if it held the key to some deep mystery. In the days that followed, Henry avoided the park. He invented commitments, changed routes, asked the driver to take Luke back to private therapies, but the boy refused. He said in a low, firm voice that he needed to go back to the park. Henry hesitated. He ended up giving in, more from exhaustion than from conviction. And to his surprise and displeasure, there, exactly in the same place, the girl was there again. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. Almost a week had passed since the first meeting with Claire. The girl, true to her word, appeared every day at the same time at the same spot in the park. In the first few days, Henry tried to avoid her, changing the path or shortening the walk, but Luke's insistence was stronger. The boy, previously so apathetic, now showed a genuine interest in the meetings with the strange, barefoot girl. That morning, with a particularly grey sky typical of Portland's winter, Henry watched from a distance as Claire knelt in front of Luke's chair. The girl didn't talk much, but she acted with a gentleness that no adult had shown. She didn't treat Luke like an invalid, nor like a fragile child. She talked to him normally, as if the wheelchair didn't exist. What are they talking about so? Much, Henry muttered to himself, sitting on a bench a few meters away. Part of him wanted to approach, to listen, to participate, but something kept him at a distance, as if that moment belonged only to the two of them. At home, Luke's behavior began to change subtly. The boy began to flip through old family albums, something he had previously avoided, as if the photographs could burn his fingers. He asked to have dinner in the living room, no longer isolated in his room, and most surprisingly, he began to write in the notebook Claire had given him. Page after page of still childish but determined handwriting. Henry, curious and concerned, tried to peek at the contents one night while his son slept, but the notebook was kept under the pillow, and something in Luke's serene face prevented him from violating that small sanctuary. "What is that girl doing to my son?" he asked Mrs. Susan, the housekeeper who had been taking care of the house since before Luke was born. The woman, with her grey hair always tied in a perfect bun, smiled wisely. "Maybe she's just listening, Doctor. Something that we adults don't always know how to do." Mrs. Susan's words echoed in Henry's mind. It was true that since the accident, he had difficulty listening to his son, not for lack of interest, but because every word, every look from the boy was a painful reminder of Caroline, of how she made Luke laugh with her crazy stories, of how the two had the same sparkle in their eyes when they got excited about something. On one of those afternoons in the park, Henry finally gathered the courage and approached Claire and Luke. The two were sitting on the grass, the notebook open between them. Claire was drawing something while Luke watched attentively. "May I join you?" asked Henry hesitantly. Claire looked at Luke as if asking permission, and the boy nodded slightly. "We're drawing treasure maps," explained Claire, showing the notebook. "Luke, Claire's helping me find what was lost." "And what was lost?" asked Henry, intrigued. "Courage," answered Luke, surprising his father. "Claire says that courage is like a muscle. If you don't use it, it weakens." Henry felt a lump in his throat. When was the last time he had been truly brave? Not the kind of courage displayed in public, in corporate speeches or business decisions, but real courage, the courage to face one's own shadows, one's own fears. "Claire, tell me more about yourself," asked Henry, trying to change the subject. "Where are your parents?" The girl's smile diminished a little. "My mom left when I was little. My dad—" She hesitated. "My dad had an accident like Luke's mom." Henry swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," replied Claire, smiling again. "He's fine now, in a place without pain." Luke looked at his friend with a new intensity. "Did you miss him a lot?" "Every day," replied Claire simply. "But my grandmother taught me that people don't really go away. They just change form. They stay in the air, in the light, in memories." "And does that help?" asked Luke in a whisper. "Sometimes," replied Claire honestly. "Other times it still hurts a lot. But the pain is important too. It reminds us that the love was real." Henry observed the conversation, surprised by the girl's maturity. How could someone so young talk about loss with such clarity? With such acceptance? "Your grandmother must be a very wise woman," he commented. Claire smiled. "Grandma Judith knows all the secrets of herbs and souls. She says some people need medicine for the body, others need medicine for the spirit." "And what medicine do we need?" asked Henry, entering the game. Claire suddenly became serious. "Truth, it's the only medicine that heals invisible wounds." The rest of the afternoon passed in a surprisingly pleasant way. For the first time in months, Henry allowed himself to relax a little. He observed how Luke got excited when telling Claire about his interest in astronomy, something the boy hadn't mentioned since the accident. He noticed how the girl had the gift of asking simple but profound questions that encouraged Luke to speak more, to open up. When the sun began to set, coloring Portland's sky with orange hues, Claire said goodbye. "I have to go. Grandma Judith doesn't like it when I arrive after dark." "Where do you live?" asked Henry, suddenly concerned about the girl's safety. "In Rosemont," replied Claire, pointing to an area further away from the park. "The house on the corner with the blue windows." Henry knew the neighborhood. It was a simple area with modest but dignified houses. It was at least a 20-minute walk from the park. "I can take you home," he offered hesitantly. "It's getting late." Claire seemed to consider the offer for a moment. "Grandma Judith would like to meet you," she finally said. "She always says she needs to meet the friends I make in the park." Luke looked at his father expectantly. "Can we go, Dad? Please." Henry couldn't say no to that look, the first genuine request his son had made in months. The journey to Claire's house was short by car, but revealing. The girl sat in the back seat next to Luke, pointing out places and telling small stories about the neighborhood. The baker who gave yesterday's bread to children after closing. The lady at number 14 who raised stray cats. The improvised field where boys played soccer on Sundays. The house with blue windows was small but well maintained. A modest garden, full of herbs and colorful flowers, occupied the small front space. On the wooden gate, a simple sign, "Judith, Healer and Counselor." The door opened before they even rang the bell. A dark-skinned woman with snow-white hair appeared, wearing a printed dress and a blue apron. "You finally brought them, Claire," she said, with a warm smile. "I was expecting you." Henry felt a chill. How did that lady know they were coming? "Grandma, this is Luke," Claire introduced. "And this is his father, Dr. Henry. Doctor of bodies, not souls," commented Mrs. Judith with a playful sparkle in her eyes. Come in, I just made a cornbread that's asking to be eaten." The interior of the house was simple, but welcoming. Colourful walls displayed pictures of Catholic saints side by side with symbols that Henry didn't recognize. Dried herbs hung from the kitchen ceiling, filling the air with a pleasant and comforting aroma. "So," said Mrs. Judith, serving generous slices of cake on old porcelain plates, "you finally met my granddaughter." The visit to Mrs. Judith's house lasted longer than Henry had planned. The cornbread, warm and fluffy, was just the beginning of a surprisingly pleasant afternoon. The old lady had the same gift as her granddaughter. She asked questions that seemed simple, but that touched on deep points like gentle fingers on open wounds. "So, doctor, why can a man who heals others not heal his own house?" asked Mrs. Judith, while serving an herbal tea that Henry didn't recognize, but accepted out of politeness. "Some things are beyond medicine," he replied, feeling strangely comfortable talking to this lady he barely knew. "Nothing is beyond healing," countered Mrs. Judith with a serene smile. "Only the remedy changes." While they talked, Claire took Luke to see the backyard, a small green oasis full of medicinal plants, fruit trees, and even a small vegetable garden. Henry could hear, through the open window, his son's animated voice, a sound that had become rare in recent months. "Your granddaughter has been very kind to Luke," commented Henry, watching the children through the window. "He seemed different with her." "Claire has a gift," explained Mrs. Judith, following the doctor's gaze. "She sees people from the inside. It's always been that way since she was little." "What do you mean?" "She feels other people's pain as if it were her own. She sees what's broken inside people." The old lady took a sip of tea before continuing. "When my son and daughter-in-law had the accident, Claire was only 6 years old. That night, even before receiving the news, she woke up crying. Said she had seen the light taking her father and mother." Henry felt a chill. "I'm sorry." "Life follows its course, doctor. The river doesn't stop because a leaf fell." Mrs. Judith leaned a little closer. "But tell me, what happened to your boy? Why doesn't he walk anymore?" Henry hesitated. It was a question he had answered dozens of times in offices and clinics, always with the same frustration. "We don't know for sure. Physically, he's perfect. The doctors say it could be psychological, a result of the trauma from the accident." "The accident that took your wife," completed Mrs. Judith, not as a question but as a statement. Henry just nodded, feeling the familiar lump in his throat. "And you, doctor, how have you been dealing with your own pain?" The question caught Henry off guard. Nobody asked him that. People asked about Luke, about the treatments, about the routine, but no one seemed to remember that he had also lost someone. That he was also broken inside. "I move forward," he answered automatically. "I have to be strong for Luke." Mrs. Judith shook her head, as if she had heard a wrong answer. "Being strong doesn't mean not feeling, doctor. It means feeling everything, and still continuing to breathe." The healer's words echoed inside Henry like a bell. For months he had tried to appear unshakable, to show no weakness in front of his son, friends, employees. He had buried his pain under layers upon layers of work, responsibilities, and a rigorous routine. But the pain was still there, pulsing, growing like an invisible tumor. "Tomorrow is Saturday," said Mrs. Judith, changing the subject. "Why don't you bring a snack and spend the afternoon here? We can have a picnic in the backyard. Claire loves picnics." The suggestion was so unexpected, so outside the rigid routine that Henry had established, that his first reaction was to refuse. But then through the window he saw Luke smiling as Claire showed him a butterfly perched on a flower. A genuine smile, the first in so long. That would be great," he replied, surprising himself. When they returned home that night, Luke was different, lighter. During dinner he talked about the plants Claire had shown him, about how Mrs. Judith knew the name and use of each one. He mentioned, with an almost forgotten animation, that the healer had promised to teach him how to make a natural remedy for headaches. "She said, 'I have good hands for healing,'" Luke said, with a glint of pride in his eyes. "Like you, Dad." Henry felt something warm spread in his chest. It was the first time in months that his son had established any kind of positive connection between them. That night, after Luke went to sleep, Henry did something he had been avoiding for a long time. He entered Caroline's old room. Everything was as she had left it. The creams on the dresser, the books on the nightstand, the perfume he could still smell in the air if he closed his eyes hard enough. He sat on the edge of the bed they had once shared and allowed himself to remember, not just the accident, the loss, the pain, but the good moments. The day they met in medical school, she studying pediatrics, he already focused on becoming a renowned neurologist. The first time he saw her smile, a smile that lit up her whole face and reached her eyes. The day of Luke's birth, when Caroline, exhausted but radiant, placed the tiny baby in his arms and said, "Look what we made. Isn't it a miracle?" The tears came silent at first, then in deep sobs that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. Henry cried as he hadn't allowed himself to cry since the funeral. He cried for Caroline, for Luke, for himself, for everything they had lost and for everything they could have been. When the tears finally dried, he felt strangely light, as if something heavy and toxic had been drained from his body. Exhausted, he fell asleep right there on the bed that still held Caroline's scent. He dreamed of her that night, not a distressing dream like he usually had, full of images of the accident and silent screams. It was a calm dream, where Caroline smiled and said, "It's okay, my love. You two will be all right." Saturday dawned with a surprisingly blue sky for Portland standards. Henry woke up feeling different, as if something had shifted inside him. He prepared a special breakfast, pancakes with honey, Luke's favorite. While cooking, he found himself humming softly a song that Caroline used to sing while making dinner. Luke appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas, dragging himself in the wheelchair. "Good morning," said Henry, trying to keep his voice casual, as if this domestic scene wasn't extraordinary after months of silent breakfasts or breakfast taken separately. Luke raised his eyebrows, surprised. "Pancakes? I thought it would be good for a special day. We're taking a snack for the picnic at Mrs. Judith's house, remember?" The boy's face lit up. "Can we take cake? Claire said she really likes chocolate cake." "We can," agreed Henry, smiling. "Mrs. Susan can help us make one." The morning passed in an almost festive atmosphere. Henry, Luke, and Mrs. Susan took turns in the kitchen preparing sandwiches, cakes, and juices for the picnic. The housekeeper, surprised and moved by the change in the house's atmosphere, couldn't stop smiling as she helped Luke decorate the chocolate cake with colorful sprinkles. "The doctor is different today," she commented at a moment when she was alone with Luke. "Lighter. He cried last night," replied the boy with wisdom beyond his years. "I heard him. It did him good." Mrs. Susan just nodded, understanding. Around noon, they left for Mrs. Judith's house, the car loaded with the picnic basket and a visibly excited Luke. When they arrived, they were greeted by Claire, who wore a simple dress printed with flowers, so different from the improvised white smock she wore in the park. "You really came," she exclaimed with a radiant smile. "Grandma Judith is finishing setting up the backyard. Come." The backyard had been transformed. A large, colorful blanket was spread on the grass, pillows scattered around, and small decorative lights hung from the trees, creating an almost magical environment, even in daylight. "Is all this for us?" asked Luke, amazed. "Claire hasn't talked about anything else since yesterday," replied Mrs. Judith, appearing with a pitcher of juice. "She even made me take the Christmas lights out of the closet to decorate." The picnic was a success. The children ate, laughed, and even played, or rather Claire played, running around the yard, while Luke watched her from the chair, laughing at her antics. Henry and Mrs. Judith conversed, discovering common interests and stories to share. At one point, Claire approached Luke and whispered something in his ear. The boy became serious, then nodded. The girl then addressed Henry. "Dr. Henry, can I show you and Luke something? It's a special place nearby." Henry looked at Mrs. Judith, who nodded with an enigmatic smile. "Go ahead. It's good to discover new places." The special place that Claire wanted to show was a few blocks from Mrs. Judith's house. Henry pushed Luke's chair while Claire skipped ahead, guiding them through quiet streets of simple, colorful houses. At each corner, the girl pointed to something, a particularly old tree, a wall covered with flowers, a lazy cat sunbathing, and told small stories about the neighborhood and its residents. Mr. Anthony lives there, who makes the best cheese. Bred in the city, and in that blue house lives Mrs. Carla, who lost her husband 3 years ago and now raises 10 dogs rescued from the street. Henry observed how Luke absorbed each word, each story, as if he were rediscovering the world. How long had it been since the boy had shown this kind of interest in something beyond the 4 walls of his room? "We're here," announced Claire, stopping in front of a small plot surrounded by a low stone wall. A wooden gate, half hidden by flowering vines, led to a kind of community garden. "What is this place?" asked Henry, curious. "It's the Garden of Memories," replied Claire, opening. The gate. People from the neighborhood plant flowers to remember those who have departed. Henry felt a tightness in his chest. He wasn't prepared for something like this. He looked at Luke, expecting to see discomfort, but his son seemed calm, even curious. The interior of the garden was surprisingly beautiful. Well-tended beds displayed flowers, of all colors and types. Small wooden or stone plaques identified each space. For my mother, Louise, in memory of John, eternal friend, for our angel Gabriel. Grandma Judith helped create this place, explained Claire, walking slowly along the stone paths. She says that longing, when kept only inside us, becomes a pain that doesn't heal. But when we transform it into something beautiful, like a flower, it becomes lighter. Luke looked around, absorbing every detail, every color, every message, engraved on the plaques. Do you have any flowers here?" he asked hesitantly. Claire nodded and guided them to a bed in the sunniest corner of the garden. There, red and yellow roses grew lush around a small plaque that read, "For my parents who taught me to see beyond the eyes." "I come here every week," Claire said. "I bring water, remove weeds, talk to them." "Talk?" asked Henry, intrigued. "Yes. I tell them how my week was, what I learned, the people I met," Claire smiled. "Grandma Judith says they can hear me, not with their ears, but with their souls." Luke was silent for a long moment, contemplating the roses. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Can we make a flower bed for my mum?" The question caught Henry off guard. Since the accident, Luke had avoided talking about Caroline, as if saying her name could bring all the pain back. Now there he was, wanting to create a memorial for her. "Of course we can," replied Henry with a choked voice. "What do you think she would like?" Luke thought for a moment. "Sunflowers. She always said they were happy flowers, that they followed the sun." "There's an empty space over there." Claire pointed to a bed not yet occupied. "We can ask Grandma Judith for the seeds. She has everything in that house." The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to preparing the new flower bed. Henry, with his sleeves rolled up and his knees on the ground, dug the earth while Claire explained to Luke how to plant the seeds they had fetched from Mrs. Judith's house. The healer also gave them a small wooden plaque and paints so they could personalize the memorial. Luke, still in the wheelchair, actively participated, his hands sinking into the dark, fertile soil. At one point, Henry caught him smiling, a genuine, luminous smile that reminded him so much of Caroline it almost hurt to look. "She would have loved this," commented Henry, almost without realizing he was speaking aloud. "She is loving it," corrected Claire with the simplicity and certainty that only children possess. "Look how the sun is shining brighter now." And indeed, at that exact moment, a particularly intense ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the newly prepared bed. When they finished, they contemplated in silence the work they had done. The plaque, painted by Luke with careful letters, simply said, "For Caroline, who taught us to smile even on grey days. With love, Luke and Henry." "Now you can come here whenever you want to talk to her," said Claire, "and when the sunflowers grow, it will be like she's smiling back at you." On the way back home, Luke was quiet, but it was a different silence, not the heavy and oppressive silence of the last few months, but a contemplative, almost serene silence. Henry also felt different. The experience in the Garden of Memories had touched something inside him, as if a small window had been opened in a room that had been closed for a long time. That night, After putting Luke to bed, Henry returned to Caroline's room. This time he didn't enter full of guilt and pain, but with a purpose. He opened the dresser drawers, the closet doors, looking for something specific, and he found it, the memory box that Caroline had kept since their dating days. Inside, there were letters, movie tickets, small gifts, photographs, tangible memories of a shared life. Among the items, Henry found the old electronic secretary that Caroline used in her pediatric office. On an impulse, he connected the device to the outlet. The red light blinked, indicating saved messages. With his heart racing, Henry pressed the play button. Caroline's voice filled the room so clear and vibrant that for a second Henry had the illusion that she might walk through the door at any moment. They were old messages, notices for the secretary, messages for patients, reminders to buy milk or pick up Luke from school. Simple, everyday things, but now they seemed precious. Henry, don't forget you promised to take Luke to the planetarium. This weekend. He's counting the days. Love you. See you later. The message, recorded a few days before the accident, hit Henry like lightning. The planetarium. Luke had always been fascinated by stars, planets, the universe. Caroline had planned the visit as a surprise for their son's birthday. After the accident, Henry cancelled everything, unable to fulfill that promise without her. Sitting on the floor of the room, surrounded by Caroline's memories, Henry had an epiphany. Perhaps the path to healing wasn't to avoid the memories, but to embrace them. Not to bury the past, but to honor it, transform it into something that could illuminate the future, like the flowers in the garden of memories. That night, Henry again had a dream with Caroline. This time she was in the garden of memories, among the sunflowers that hadn't yet grown, but in the dream were tall and vibrant. "You're on the right path," she said, smiling. "Keep going. He'll walk again when he's ready." Henry woke up with the first lights of dawn, feeling strangely energized. An idea had formed during the night, crystalline and urgent. He got up, took a quick shower, and went to prepare breakfast. When Luke appeared in the kitchen, Henry already had everything planned. "Good morning," he said, placing a cup of hot chocolate in front of his son. "I have a proposal for you." Luke raised his eyebrows, curious. "What do you think of doing something similar to the Garden of Memories here at home? Not with flowers, but with photos, objects, memories of Mum. We could use that empty wall in the living room." For an instant, Henry feared he had gone too far, too fast. But then Luke smiled, a small smile, but real. "Can we invite Claire to help us?" he asked. "She has good ideas." "Of course," agreed Henry, relieved. "We can invite her over today if you want." So, that very afternoon, Claire crossed the mansion's gate for the first time. The girl looked around, impressed by the size of the house and garden, but not intimidated. She carried a colorful cloth bag which revealed itself to be full of materials: safety scissors, glue, colored ribbons, pieces of fabric. "Grandma Judith helped me separate some things," she explained. "She said a memory wall needs texture and color, not just photos." Henry had already separated dozens of photographs, from the oldest to the most recent. Portraits of Caroline alone, with him, with Luke, with friends and family. Moments captured on film that told the story of that family. He also found significant objects: the stethoscope Caroline used, the wedding ring that Henry had kept in a drawer, Luke's first little shoe. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. The memory wall began as a simple project, but quickly transformed into something larger. What was meant to be just a few photos and objects of Caroline in the living room expanded to other rooms of the house. Each space gained a bit of her presence. In the kitchen, her favorite recipes were framed. In the garden, Henry planted the flowers she had loved so much. In the office, her pediatric medicine books returned to the shelves. Claire visited almost daily, always bringing new ideas and contagious energy. The girl had the gift of transforming grief into celebration, of making the memories of Caroline evoke smiles, not just tears. "My grandmother always says that we only truly die when no one tells our stories anymore," commented Claire one afternoon, while helping Luke organize an album with photos of his mother. That's why it's important to talk about the people we love, even when they're no longer physically here. Luke, who previously avoided any mention of his mother, now shared stories and memories with enthusiasm. "Remember when Mum tried to make that birthday cake for me, and it turned out all crooked?" he asked Henry, laughing. "She said it was an artistic cake." Henry smiled, remembering the episode, and yet it was the most delicious cake I've ever eaten. These small exchanges, these moments of shared remembrance, were like bridges being rebuilt between father and son. Claire's presence acted as a catalyst, creating a safe space where both could express their feelings without fear or shame. Mrs. Susan, the housekeeper, observed the transformation of the house and the family with teary eyes. "It's like the house is breathing again," she commented to Henry one morning while they were serving coffee. "The boy is different. You are too, sir." It was true. Henry felt different. The nights of insomnia decreased, the constant weight in his chest had become lighter, and he began to find pleasure in small things again. The taste of coffee in the morning, the smell of freshly cut grass, the sound of Luke's laughter echoing through the corridors of the house. But the most surprising change was in Luke. The boy, previously so closed and apathetic, now showed interest in everything around him. He returned to drawing, to reading the astronomy books he loved so much, even to making plans for the future. "Dad, do you think we could visit the planetarium someday?" he asked during dinner, about 2 weeks after the start of the Memory Wall project. The question caught Henry off guard. The planetarium, the unfulfilled promise, the message on the electronic secretary. He felt a lump in his throat, but managed to answer with a firm voice. "Of course. How about next weekend?" Luke's smile was like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. "Can we invite Claire? If Mrs. Judith allows, why not?" The next morning, Henry called the planetarium to reserve tickets for Saturday. Then he took the car and drove to Mrs. Judith's house to personally extend the invitation. He found the healer in the front garden, tending to her medicinal herbs. "Good morning, Mrs. Judith. Is Claire here?" "She went to take a remedy to Mrs. Carla. That arthritis doesn't give the poor woman any rest," replied the lady, cleaning her hands on her apron. "But come in, doctor. The coffee is fresh." In the cozy kitchen, while drinking coffee and eating, cornbread still warm from the oven, Henry extended the invitation for the planetarium. Mrs. Judith smiled, pleased. "Claire will love it. That girl has had her head in the stars since she was little." The old lady paused, observing Henry with her wise eyes. "You and Luke are different, lighter." "Thanks to Claire in large part," acknowledged Henry. "She has been, well, a miracle in our lives." Mrs. Judith nodded, thoughtful. "Claire has that gift. She always has. After she lost her parents, it seemed like her sensitivity became even more acute, as if the pain had opened a channel inside her." "How did they pass away?" asked Henry hesitantly. "If you don't mind me asking." "A car accident almost 6 years ago," replied Mrs. Judith with a sigh. "Wet road, a truck on the wrong side. Those things that can't be explained or properly accepted." Henry felt a chill. The similarity to the accident that had taken Caroline was disturbing. "Was Claire in the car?" he asked, fearful of the answer. "No, thank God. She was with me that day. But she was the first to feel it. She woke up in the middle of the night crying, saying her mommy and daddy had become stars." Mrs. Judith wiped away a discreet tear. "When the phone rang in the middle of the night, I already knew what it was." Henry remained silent, absorbing the story. Now he better understood the connection between Claire and Luke, the girl's ability to understand the boy's pain. Both had lost a fundamental pillar in their lives. Both knew the bitter taste of absence. "Claire is a special child," continued Mrs. Judith. "She always has been. She sees things that most people don't see. She feels what others feel. At first it scared her. Now she understands it's a gift. She has helped Luke a lot," confessed Henry. "And me too, to be honest." Mrs. Judith smiled, a smile full of affection and wisdom. "That's how healing works, Doctor. Sometimes those who need help the most end up being the channel to help others. It's as if pain, when shared, loses some of its power." At that moment, Claire entered through the kitchen door, her cheeks flushed from the cold wind and a smile lighting up her face. "Dr. Henry, what a nice surprise." "I came to make an invitation," he explained, returning the smile. "Luke and I are going to the planetarium on Saturday, and we wanted to know if you'd like to come with us." The girl's eyes widened with excitement. "The planetarium, the one with the ceiling that shows the stars and planets? I've never been." "Then it will be your first time," said Henry, feeling a wave of affection for the girl. "If your grandmother allows, of course." "I already said you can go," confirmed Mrs. Judith, winking at her granddaughter, "as long as you promise to behave and obey Dr. Henry." "I promise," exclaimed Claire, jumping with joy. "I'll tell Luke tomorrow in the park." Saturday dawned with a cobalt blue sky without a single cloud, a true gift for Portland, known for its unstable weather. Henry woke up early, filled with an almost childish excitement. It was as if he was about to fulfill not just a promise made to Luke, but also a silent promise to Caroline. He prepared a special breakfast: American pancakes, fresh orange juice, fruits cut in fun shapes. Luke appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas, his eyes sleepy but bright with expectation. "Today's the day," said Henry, serving a stack of pancakes on his son's plate. "Are you excited?" Luke nodded, his mouth already full. He had woken up with a voracious appetite, something rare in recent months. After breakfast, while Luke was getting ready, Henry went to his room and opened the drawer of his bedside table. From there he took out a small package, a gift he had secretly bought for his son days before. It was a portable telescope, nothing too sophisticated, but perfect for an enthusiastic beginner. At 10 in the morning, they passed by to pick up Claire. The girl was already waiting at the gate, wearing a blue dress with small stars printed on it and carrying a pink backpack. Mrs. Judith accompanied her, smiling as she saw the car approach. "Behave yourself, you hear?" the grandmother recommended, adjusting the bow in her granddaughter's hair. "And tell me everything when you get back." Claire nodded, gave a loud kiss on her grandmother's cheek, and ran to the car where Luke was waiting for her with a shy smile. The planetarium was located downtown, in a modern building with a large silver dome that reflected the morning sun. When they arrived, Claire couldn't contain her excitement. She hopped from one side to the other, pointing to the posters, to the architecture, to everything her eager eyes captured. Luke, in his wheelchair, observed his friend with a mixture of amusement and admiration. Henry noticed how his son seemed more alert, more present than at any other moment since the accident. The morning session was a special presentation about the solar system, narrated by an astronomer with a deep and melodious voice. When the lights went out and the dome's ceiling transformed into a vast starry sky, Henry heard Claire's muffled exclamations and Luke's sigh of admiration. Throughout the presentation, Henry divided his attention between the spectacle above and the reactions of the children beside him. Claire pointed and whispered questions, while Luke, with absolute concentration, absorbed every detail, every piece of information. At one specific moment, when the narration spoke about constellations and how ancient civilizations saw in them figures of heroes, gods, and animals, Claire leaned towards Luke and whispered something in his ear. The boy became very quiet for an instant, then nodded as if agreeing with something profound. Later, during lunch at a nearby diner, Henry asked about that moment. "What did Claire say to you during the presentation? You looked thoughtful." Luke took a sip of his soda before answering. "She said that maybe Mum is a star now, that the people we love never completely disappear, they just change form. Like stars, which even when they die, their light continues traveling through space for a long time." Henry felt a lump in his throat. The simplicity and depth of that idea touched him deeply. "That's a beautiful way to think," he finally managed to say. "Grandma Judith says that death is just a transformation," added Claire, biting into her sandwich. "Like a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly. We don't see the process, just the result." Henry observed the two children, amazed by their natural wisdom, their ability to find beauty and meaning even in the most difficult things in life. After lunch, they visited the planetarium's gift shop. Henry let each one choose a souvenir item, Claire opted for a set of shiny stickers of planets and stars. Luke, after much contemplation of the options, chose a book about constellations. The trip to the planetarium marked a turning point in Henry and Luke's life. It was as if an invisible gate had been opened, allowing memories, feelings, and especially hopes to flow again. In the days that followed, Luke began to talk more about the future, about things he would like to do, places he would like to visit. One night, as Henry was helping him prepare for bed, Luke asked a question that took him by surprise. "Dad, do you think I'll be in this chair forever?" Henry sat on the edge of the bed, carefully choosing his words. "The doctors haven't found any physical reason for you not to walk, Luke. So no, I don't think you'll be in the chair forever." "Claire says I'll walk again when I'm ready," commented the boy, staring at the ceiling where they had stuck fluorescent stars. "She says my body is fine. It's just my soul that's still hurt." Henry felt a tightness in his chest. It was practically the same diagnosis that the specialists had given, but in simple and direct words that a child could understand. "And what do you think about that?" he asked, curious about his son's perspective. Luke was silent for a moment, thoughtful. "I think she's right. It's like a part of me is afraid to keep walking without Mom." The honesty of the answer hit Henry like a wave. How many times had he himself felt that fear of moving forward, of finding joy again, as if that would be a betrayal of Caroline's memory. "You know," he said, holding his son's hand, "I think we all feel a bit of that. Fear of continuing. But your mother, knowing her as I did, would be the first to say that we should keep walking." Luke smiled, a small but understanding smile. "Claire said something similar, that Mom would be sad if she saw us stuck in time." Henry kissed his son's forehead, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude. This Claire is really very wise for her age. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The friendship between Luke and Claire flourished, as did the sunflowers they had planted in the garden of memories. The girl had become a constant presence in the house, bringing with her a light and transformative energy. Mrs. Judith also visited occasionally, always with some new herb for tea or an interesting story to share. Over time, the mansion that once seemed like a mausoleum gained new life. The windows remained open, letting in light and fresh air. Music played again through the corridors, sometimes Caroline's favorite songs, other times new melodies that Claire taught Luke. Meals, previously tense and silent moments, transformed into occasions of conversation and even laughter. Henry gradually returned to being more involved with work at the clinics, but now with a different perspective. Inspired by Mrs. Judith's simple wisdom and Claire's sensitivity, he began to implement changes in the way his patients were treated. He introduced more welcoming spaces, emotional support programs for family members, even a small therapeutic garden at the back of the main clinic. "Medicine doesn't just heal the body," he explained during a meeting with his team. "We need to look at the human being as a whole. Some pains don't show up on tests, but they're as real as a fracture." His colleagues noticed the change in him, a more compassionate Henry, more attentive to the emotional needs, not just clinical, of the patients. Some attributed the transformation to the natural process of grief and acceptance. Others speculated about a new romance, perhaps. Few knew about the true source of this change, a barefoot girl with a toy stethoscope. Luke also continued to progress. With the help of a new occupational therapist recommended by Henry, the boy began to strengthen the muscles in his legs through daily exercises. At first, they were just simple movements in the pool or lying in bed. Then they evolved to attempts to stand, supported by parallel bars. Claire accompanied each session, encouraging her friend with her contagious enthusiasm. "See, your legs are remembering how good it is to move." On a particularly significant afternoon, about 5 months after the first meeting in the park, something extraordinary happened. Henry, Luke, and Claire were in the backyard of the mansion. They had just planted a small bed of sunflowers, inspired by what they had done in the Garden of Memories. Claire was telling them about how the sunflowers in the community garden were now huge, almost her height. "I need to see that," said Luke, with a gleam of determination in his eyes. "We can go tomorrow," suggested Henry. or on the weekend if you prefer." "No," said Luke, gripping the arms of the wheelchair. "I want to see now." Before Henry could respond, Luke did something unexpected. Using his arms as support, he pushed himself up, standing beside the chair. His legs visibly trembled with the effort, and his face showed absolute concentration. "Luke!" exclaimed Henry, running to support his son. "No," said the boy, his voice tense but determined. "Don't hold me. I can do it." Claire observed the scene with wide eyes, but didn't seem surprised. It was as if she had been expecting this moment, as if she knew it would come. With visible effort, Luke took a first hesitant step, then another and another. His steps were unstable, trembling, but they were steps, real ones. Henry walked beside him, ready to support his son if necessary, but respecting his desire for independence. "I'm walking, Dad," said Luke, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm walking again." "Yes, son," replied Henry with tears in his eyes. "You are." Claire clapped her hands, jumping with joy. "I knew it. I knew you could do it when you were ready." Luke managed to take about 10 steps before his legs gave in to the effort. Henry caught him in his arms before he fell, hugging him tightly. Father and son cried together, not tears of sadness or loss, but of joy, of overcoming, of beginning anew. That day marked the beginning of a new phase. Luke's progress was slow but steady. Each day he managed to take a few more steps, stand, for a longer time. The physiotherapy sessions, previously faced with resignation, became moments of determination and hope. 2 weeks after the first step, they made a special visit to the Garden of Memories. Luke insisted on walking, supported by a cane and his father's arm. The journey that would normally take a few minutes lasted almost an hour, but each step was a victory. When they finally reached the bed where they had planted the sunflowers in honor of Caroline, the sight was breathtaking. The flowers had grown strong and vigorous, their golden faces turned towards the sun exactly as Luke had imagined. "Look, Mom," said the boy in a low voice. "I'm walking again, and there's a part of me that thinks you helped somehow." Henry felt a shiver run down his spine. It was exactly what Caroline would have done, find a way to help even when everything seemed impossible. Claire, who had accompanied them along with Mrs. Judith, approached with a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked along the way. She carefully placed them next to the sunflowers. "For Luke's mom," she said simply, "for having made such a brave son, Mrs." Judith observed the scene with a serene smile. When her eyes met Henry's, there was a deep understanding in them, as if both shared a secret that didn't need to be spoken aloud. That night, back at the mansion, Henry found Luke in his room, leafing through the notebook that Claire had given him on the first day. The pages were filled with drawings, thoughts, memories, a diary of his journey over the last few months. "May I see?" asked Henry, sitting next to his son. Luke nodded, handing the notebook to his father. On the first page, in the still hesitant handwriting of someone who was beginning to write again after a long period, there was a simple phrase, "Things I can't say out loud." The following pages contained fears, confessions, memories. Henry read with a heavy heart about how Luke felt guilty about the accident, how he thought that if he had behaved better in the car, his mother would still be alive, how he was afraid that his father would also disappear one day, how sometimes he woke up in the middle of the night, thinking he had heard his mother's voice. But as he advanced through the notebook, he noticed a transformation. The writings became more hopeful. There were plans for the future, happy memories of his mother, drawings of stars and planets. On the last filled page, Luke had written, "Today I took my first steps. Mom would be proud." Henry closed the notebook with tears in his eyes. "She would be very proud, son, and I am too." Luke smiled, a smile that now reached his eyes. "Claire says she fulfilled her promise. She healed our invisible pain." "It's true," agreed Henry, "although I never paid her the million she asked for on the little sign." They both laughed, remembering that first unlikely encounter in the park. "I think we paid in another way," reflected Luke. Claire said she also felt alone before meeting us, that helping us was like helping herself. Henry nodded, thoughtful. It was true. The girl who had entered their lives to heal invisible wounds ended up having her own wounds healed in the process. That's how true healing worked, not as a one-way street, but as a circle of giving and receiving, of mutual understanding, of shared compassion. In the months that followed, life continued to flourish for all of them. Luke returned to school, first part-time, then full-time. His physical recovery continued progressively until the wheelchair became just a memory. Claire and Mrs. Judith remained constant presences in their lives, creating bonds that went beyond common friendship. They were bonds of chosen family, of souls that recognize and embrace each other. Henry transformed one wing of his main clinic into an integrative therapy center, where conventional medical practices were complemented by more holistic approaches. He invited Mrs. Judith to be a consultant for the project, valuing her traditional wisdom and deep understanding of human nature. And on a special spring afternoon, when the sunflowers began to bloom again, both in the mansion's garden and in the Garden of Memories, Luke made an observation that perfectly captured the journey they had all traveled. "You know, Dad, I think I understood what Claire meant that first day. About healing invisible pains. It's not about making the pain completely disappear. It's learning to carry that pain in a way that doesn't prevent us from moving forward." Henry hugged his son, feeling a pride that transcended words. He looked at the sky, imagining Caroline somewhere among the stars smiling at them. He silently thanked the mysterious force that had placed a barefoot girl with a toy stethoscope in their path, exactly when they needed it most. Some healing comes from the most unexpected places. Some wounds can only be treated with remedies not found in any pharmacy. And sometimes it takes a child to remind us of the simplest and deepest truths, that pain is part of life, that memory can be a garden of flowers instead of a field of thorns, and that even in the darkest nights, the stars continue to shine above us, distant perhaps, but always present, always guiding our way back to the light. The first anniversary of Caroline's passing approached, and for the first time, Henry found himself planning not a day of somber remembrance, but a celebration of her life. With Luke and Claire's help, he organized a small gathering in the Garden of Memories, inviting close friends and family who had known and loved Caroline. "Mom wouldn't want us to be sad," Luke had said while they were planning. "She'd want music, and laughter, and her favorite desserts." On the day of the memorial, the garden was transformed. The sunflowers they had planted had grown tall and vibrant, their golden faces seeming to radiate joy rather than sorrow. Mrs. Judith had helped decorate with colorful ribbons and paper lanterns that would be lit as evening fell. Claire had insisted on baking cookies using one of Caroline's recipes that Henry had framed in the kitchen. People arrived bearing not just flowers but memories, stories of Caroline that made them laugh, that highlighted her compassion, her humor, her sometimes stubborn determination. Luke listened to each one, absorbing these new dimensions of his mother, building a more complete picture of the woman who had given him life. Henry watched his son moving comfortably among the guests, no trace of the wheelchair or the paralyzing grief that had once confined him. He caught Claire's eye across the garden, and the girl gave him a knowing smile. She was wearing a yellow dress that matched the sunflowers, her bare feet, as always, in contact with the earth. Beside her, Mrs. Judith spoke animatedly with one of Henry's colleagues from the clinic, probably sharing some herbal remedy or piece of folk wisdom. As twilight descended, they lit the lanterns and formed a circle around Caroline's sunflower bed. Henry had prepared something to say but found himself hesitating, overwhelmed by emotion. "It's okay, Dad," whispered Luke, taking his hand. "Just speak from your heart." Henry took a deep breath. "A year ago, I thought my life had ended when Caroline's did. I couldn't imagine laughter or joy or any kind of future without her. But Caroline," his voice broke slightly, "Caroline always knew better than I did. She knew that love doesn't end with death. It just changes form, like Claire taught us." He looked around at the faces illuminated by the soft glow of the lanterns. "Caroline lives on in all of us, in our memories, in the lessons she taught us, in the way she loved fearlessly and lived fully. Most of all, she lives on in our son, who has her smile, her courage, and her incredible heart. Luke stepped forward then, a small wooden box in his hands. Mom and I used to collect special things from our walks, pretty stones, unusual leaves, feathers. We called them our treasures. I found this box in her closet a few weeks ago. He opened it to reveal a collection of small, seemingly ordinary items, each surely holding a specific memory. I thought we could each take one to remember her by, and maybe add something new for others to take next year. One by one, people approached, selecting a small item from the box and placing something new inside, a seashell, a poem written on folded paper, a tiny carved wooden star. When it was Claire's turn, she carefully chose a smooth river stone, turning it over in her palm. "It feels warm," she said softly, "like it's been holding the sun." In return, she placed a tiny sachet of dried herbs in the box. "Lavender and sage," she explained to Luke. "Grandma says they help guide dreams to peaceful places." As the evening drew to a close, Henry found himself standing slightly apart, watching as Luke and Claire helped Mrs. Judith pack up the remaining food. A gentle breeze stirred the sunflowers, making them seem to nod in approval. "You did well," came a voice beside him, and he turned to find Dr. Sarah Powell, a colleague who had been one of Caroline's closest friends. "Caroline would be proud of how you've raised Luke through this, how you've both healed." Henry smiled, feeling the truth of her words. "We had help," he said, nodding toward Claire. "Sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected sources." "Sarah," followed his gaze. "The barefoot girl you told me about, your miracle worker?" "Not a miracle," Henry corrected gently. "Just someone who could see what we couldn't, who reminded us that the path forward doesn't mean leaving the past behind. It means carrying it differently." Later that night, after Luke had gone to bed, his room now adorned with astronomy posters and the telescope Henry had given him perched. By the window, Henry sat on the porch swing that had been Caroline's favorite spot. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet darkness like diamonds. He thought about the journey of the past year, from the depths of grief that had seemed insurmountable to this new place of peace that still contained sorrow but wasn't defined by it. He thought about Claire's simple wisdom and Mrs. Judith's gentle guidance. He thought about Luke's courage and resilience. Most of all, he thought about Caroline, not with the sharp pain that had once accompanied every memory, but with a gentle warmth like the river stone Claire had chosen from the box. A warmth that felt like it had been holding the sun. The following spring brought new beginnings. Luke, now fully recovered physically, had joined a junior astronomy club and spent hours gazing through his telescope at the night sky. He had also, to Henry's surprise, expressed interest in medicine, not neurology like his father, but pediatrics like his mother. "I want to help kids the way Mom did," he explained one evening as they walked home from the Garden of Memories, where they still went regularly, to tend the sunflowers. "And the way Claire helped me." Speaking of Claire, the barefoot girl had become such a fixture in their lives that Henry sometimes forgot there had been a time before her. She still visited almost daily, often bringing new ideas for projects or stories about the neighborhood characters she encountered on her walks. Mrs. Judith, too, had become part of their extended family. Her wisdom and practical approach to life's problems provided a grounding presence that balanced Henry's sometimes overly analytical mind. The integrative therapy wing at his clinic had become so successful that he was planning to expand the concept to his other locations, with Mrs. Judith consulting on the program design. One particularly memorable day, as summer approached, Henry arrived home to find Luke, Claire, and Mrs. Judith in the backyard, surrounded by what appeared to be the components of a massive project. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his briefcase and rolling up his sleeves, already prepared to join whatever creative endeavor was underway. "We're building a telescope platform," Luke exclaimed, his face flushed with excitement. "Claire found these plans online, and Mrs. Judith knows a carpenter who's going to help us with the tricky parts. We thought it could go there." Claire pointed to a corner of the yard with an unobstructed view of the sky. Then on clear nights, you and Luke can stargaze, without having to go all the way to the hilltop. Henry examined the plans, impressed by their detail. This is quite an undertaking. Are you sure we're up for it? Dad, Luke said with the patient tone of a child explaining something obvious to an adult, we rebuilt our whole lives. I think we can handle a telescope platform. Henry laughed, struck by the simple truth of his son's words. They had indeed rebuilt their lives, piece by piece, memory by memory, step by step. What had once seemed impossible, finding joy after such profound loss, had happened not in spite of their grief, but through it, as they learned to transform pain into growth. The platform project became a summer-long endeavor, bringing together not just Henry, Luke, Claire, and Mrs. Judith, but an expanding circle of friends and neighbors who stopped by to help, to offer advice, or simply to admire the progress. By August, it stood complete. A solid wooden structure with steps leading up to a viewing deck, large enough for several people, with built-in benches and even a small weatherproof cabinet for astronomical charts and equipment. The night they officially inaugurated it coincided, perhaps not coincidentally, with a meteor shower. Luke had invited his astronomy club friends, Henry had colleagues from work, and Mrs. Judith had brought several neighbors from the Garden of Memories community. Claire, as always, flitted among the groups, connecting people with her natural ease and genuine interest. As darkness fell and the first streaks of light appeared across the sky, Henry found himself standing next to Luke, their shoulders touching as they gazed upward. "Make a wish, Dad," Luke whispered, as a particularly bright meteor traced its path across the darkness. Henry closed his eyes briefly, but found he didn't need to wish for anything. Everything he truly needed was already here. His son healthy and happy beside him, a community of friends around them, and the memories of Caroline woven into the fabric of their lives, not as a burden, but as a blessing. Later, as the gathering was winding down and guests were departing with murmured thanks and promises to return, Claire approached Henry with a thoughtful expression. "Dr. Henry," she said, using the formal address she still sometimes fell back on, "remember the first day we met, when I had that sign about curing invisible pains?" Henry smiled. "How could I forget? You changed our lives that day." Claire nodded, her expression serious. "I've been thinking, maybe that's what I want to do when I grow up. Not be a regular doctor, but someone who helps with the invisible pains, the ones that don't show up on X-rays but hurt just as much." "A psychologist? Or a therapist?" Henry suggested. Claire considered this. Maybe. Or maybe something that doesn't have a name. Yet, something that combines what you do and what Grandma does, medicine for the whole person. Henry put his hand on her shoulder, feeling a surge of affection for this remarkable child. "Whatever you decide to be, Claire, you're already helping people more than you know." As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, the rhythm of their lives settled into a new normal. The memory wall continued to evolve with new photos added, some rotated out, the display changing as their relationship with grief changed. The Garden of Memories flourished under the community's care, becoming a place not just of remembrance, but of connection and healing for many who found their way there. Luke thrived at school, his earlier trauma now transformed into a deep empathy that made him a friend to those who were struggling or alone. He still visited Caroline's sunflowers regularly, sometimes with Henry, sometimes with Claire, occasionally alone. Not out of obligation, but because, as he explained, "It's where I feel closest to Mom." Henry's work at the clinics took on new dimensions as he integrated the lessons he'd learned about holistic healing. He found himself listening more deeply to patients, considering not just their physical symptoms, but the emotional landscape in which those symptoms existed. His colleagues noticed the change, with some initially skeptical but eventually won over by the improved outcomes they witnessed. And through it all, Claire remained their connection to a kind of wisdom that transcended conventional understanding. The barefoot girl with the toy stethoscope had seen what trained professionals had missed, that some wounds required a different kind of medicine, one that acknowledged the connection between heart and body, between memory and present, between loss and love. One evening, as winter released its grip and the first hints of spring appeared in early buds and longer daylight, Henry sat with Mrs. Judith on the porch, watching as Luke and Claire examined the garden for signs of returning life. "She's something special. Your granddaughter," Henry said, not for the first time. Mrs. Judith nodded, her wise eyes following the children. "We all have the capacity to see beyond the surface, Dr. Henry. Most of us just forget how as we grow older. Claire hasn't forgotten yet." "Do you think she ever will?" he asked. The old woman considered this. Not if she stays true to herself. Not if she remembers that healing isn't about erasing pain, but transforming it into something that can help others. Henry thought about his own transformation, from a doctor who treated symptoms to one who treated people, from a man paralyzed by grief to one who had learned to carry his loss with grace. "You know," he said slowly, "when Caroline died, I thought I'd never be whole again. I thought Luke and I would always be broken. But that's not how it works, is it? We're not broken. We're just reshaped." Mrs. Judith smiled, her face crinkling with the wisdom of years. Like the Japanese art of kintsugi, mending broken pottery with gold, the breaks become part of the beauty, part of the story. As they sat in comfortable silence, Luke's laughter rang out across the yard. He was showing Claire something he'd found. A tiny green shoot pushing up through the soil exactly where they had planted Caroline's favorite roses the previous fall. "Look," he called out to Henry and Mrs. Judith. "They're coming back." Henry felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. Yes, he thought, everything comes back, just in a different form.